Aloha! Welcome to another episode of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campanga. Many people believe that education is the silver bullet or the linchpin that can help solve homelessness, drug addiction, social division, and income inequality. And in Hawaii, of all places, where our many intertwined cultures all cherish our keiki and do all we can to open doors for their successes, would we not assume that a high priority is placed on having a world-class educational system? We are talking about the quality of our facilities and infrastructure, addressing deferred maintenance, adding cool rooms, and a more comprehensive curriculum approach, and appropriately valuing teachers and administrative staff. Today, we are going to talk about a wonderful program that my mother-in-law is part of, the Kupuna component or Kupuna program. So I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Director of the Kupuna component, Ms. Kaui Sang. Welcome to the show.
Aloha.
Aloha. So again, I do appreciate you coming. This is a program that I think not a lot of people know about or are aware of, and certainly if our kids go through the program, we'll hear a bit about it, but I would like to learn more about it through you, myself. My kids have gone through, so I am a bit more familiar with it as well, but if you can, please let us know from your perspective what the mission of the program is, or I believe it even has a new name or a preferred name.
Yeah, so currently the design of the program is really to get Hawaiian language, culture, and history education into the hands of the students in our schools. The Kupuna component provides an avenue to do that at the elementary level for students in grades kindergarten through grade 6. And so the intention of that program is to put those folks that sort of are able to host and provide that Hawaiian perspective for learning, the values that are tied to the people, in the host culture of Hawaii, and putting it into the hands of students so that they have this sort of foundation of how to engage in ways that are grounded locally to what it means to be someone that lives in Hawaii.
Sure. So we're talking about values such as aloha and kuleana and onipa'a. Let's engage in those a little bit. So what would be the, I suppose, let's start with those. List for me, and I think I just named 3 of them, and I think there are at least 2 more. List for me, please, the values that is the essence that we begin with.
If I think back to sort of my own kupuna and some of the things that she or they represented in my engagement with them as a mo'opuna, I think the things that shine through for me and that I see embedded in the essence of the kupuna program, the CPR program, the kupuna component, really are around this real aloha he alo relationship between the elders and the knowledge, the ike that they bring to students, and in this sort of really connected way to be able to exhibit that aloha, the loko mai ka'i, the sense of kuleana that the kupuna has to the mo'opuna, to the grandchild, and then the grandchild back to the kupuna to be able to carry that. This idea of everybody sort of being part of an ohana, and that in being a part of that ohana, there's a true sense of caring for each other. So malama, and that everybody has a place in that family structure, if you will. And so carrying that over into the kupuna program, how do the folks that are working in that program start to represent that in a learning space that's part of an educational institution that has 4 walls around it sometimes, and starting to bring that into the classroom for the students so that they start to understand their roles as students in that classroom, as students in the school, and as students in the larger community.
That's excellent. So it's grounding. It's finding a cultural grounding for the kids, whether they are Native Hawaiian or not. They're learning more about what it means to be here.
Yes.
And an interesting connection that I immediately thought of was we have a new Senate president at the moment. Just to jump to politics real quick, a new Senate President Aran Kouchi. He's from Kaui. And he set out the themes at the beginning of this session, and where he specifically went through. He said, well, it's Malama Ohana, Malama Aina. And he started to go through and he listed it, and he said, you know what, this is the approach. As we go through this legislative session, these are the themes. This is what we want to make sure that we are addressing and how we want to address it. And as I was listening to him and listening to you talking, and then as I hear from my kids as well, and really just being integrated into the community, I hear over and over again. And it's a wonderful way that this grounds everyone in this sense of aloha, in this sense of togetherness that can't really be described in however many words I can come up with. But I just thought it was wonderful how there's a connection at all levels, and there really should be. So I appreciate that. So within that as a structure, what are the primary topics, or how is the program operational? How does it work, and what is covered, and how is it covered?
So, operation side of it, the Office of Hawaiian Education provides funding to schools so that they can hire a CPR, a kupuna, to engage with students in the school level, at the school level, around sort of certain ideas, including those values that we spoke to, and creating sort of this sense of place for students. I think one of the things that in a conversation about a year ago with one of our kupuna out in the Mililani area, she talked about having to work with military students and wanting to be able to allow these students that are sometimes transitioning through Hawaii, to allow them to own Hawaii as a place that they belong to, and then also to be able to contribute back to Hawaii from the spaces that they've been. And so that it sort of broadens the context for people to belong to Hawaii in different ways. And so it's really around identifying sort of this sense of belonging for our students and allowing them to connect to those places, whether it be places in the form of people, places, or things.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent. So there's history. There's Native Hawaiian history that gets brought into the conversation. I know my kids come home and tell me about, Pele has done this and that, and the story, and brothers and sisters and everything that, and I find it fascinating. I have a degree in history, so as I learn more about myself, I enjoy hearing from them what they've learned and what their interpretation is of that. There's also a language component. There's also a language piece where vocabulary is taught. Is that just so that some of the non-Native Hawaiian kids can just be more familiar with the words, or is there more of a language, more of a conversational approach that would be desired? Is that part of the goal?
Yeah. I mean, to just talk a little bit away from the kupuna program for a little bit,
sure.
and share the context for Hawaiian language immersion schools. In that pathway, we're really working towards building student proficiency, to be able to hold conversations, and to be able to articulate all of their ideas in Hawaiian. And if you move backwards from that and go back to sort of the way Hawaiian language education takes place in the public education system outside of our immersion schools, it really is about the capacity of the adults in the system to be able to deliver a meaningful language instruction that will set students on a path towards proficiency. Specifically to the kupuna component, in any, and actually in any context, the adults are the ceiling in terms of their language, the language competency of students. The adults are the ceiling for our students. And so recognizing that not a lot of our kupuna have been fortunate enough to be able to hold on to the language because of the shift in education. We rely on what they know to be able to set the ceiling for those students that they touch. And a lot of it is really around vocabulary development, which is super important, and some basic language structures, sentence structures, that students can start to connect to things in their personal space.
Sure.
Oftentimes when we talk about language development, we talk about it sort of from a personal space and then building out the bigger your community grows. And the more experiences that you have. And so really starting off at the elementary level to be able to get students to be able to identify with those things that are directly in their reach, in their direct community. And so being able to give them the language, whether it be vocabulary or language structure, to do that. If we talk a little bit about, and we have that conversation around, or we move that conversation into culture, it's well known that culture and language actually cannot be separate, but together. And so oftentimes the kupuna are creating learning environments, learning opportunities where the two are matched together. And so you see kupuna oftentimes singing with students, teaching them about place and teaching them the language and the vocabulary about a place. And so perhaps a school in Waimanalo might sing a song that's tied to Waimanalo.
Sure.
And a school that has a kupuna in a school out in Kau will sing a song about Kau and teach the students about the vocabulary of that place, the name places, and all of the things that are tied to that community, so that the students start to grow their sense of belonging to that community in English and in Hawaiian.
Sure. And so that's also, so tying it to the region was often, maybe not always. So as you're looking back at traditional, the apua idea of how we're coming down and using all aspects. And so do some of the schools really delve into their regional, their really local history? So there's a piece of that as well as an overall. And that's part of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in all of the on all of the islands, there are sort of district leads that help to provide the professional development around designing to a place. And they work with the kupuna that are in the schools. They work with the CPI that are in the schools, so that they can build that kind of content knowledge around curriculum design, so that the students can have access.
That's an important thing to really understand, because as you go from one ridge to another ridge, there are differences, and especially now we're talking 2-3 ridges away. We're talking Waimanalo from Waianae. There are differences, and it's important from a cultural perspective, from a history perspective, from just a grounding into who we are and why we live the way we live, and how it's tied into, well, Waianae as opposed to Waimanalo, as opposed to Honolulu, and what those differences are.
And because it's important to your identity.
Yes.
It's important to your identity, and education is all about being able to identify with who you are and use that as a place of strength to be able to access different concepts.
I was recently reading, we have to remember, before we can have our children, before our keiki can begin to really take on a higher concept of education, we need to make sure that we have taken care of their self-identity, so that they do understand where they're coming from and why. That gives them the basis to start. I understand who I am and why I think the things I think, or I'm beginning to understand why I think the things, and why my family is trying to teach me what they're teaching me, and how we've made the choice to be into an immersion school, or into or a public school, or if you have the opportunity. I feel very fortunate that my son has been able to get into Kamehameha, and he had the level of learning that he gets specifically related to Hawaiian culture is extraordinary. When he comes home with songs, and he sings in Hawaiian, and his vocabulary has been growing. such that now, we drive around and he's like, oh, that's this, oh, it's a moku this, and he's doing, explaining things.
That's
like,
great.
oh,
That's
you're
good to
10 years
hear.
old, and I love that you explain what is, and that's exactly what I hoped for. That's exactly what I hoped for, and he's getting that. So okay, we are going to take a quick little break. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you very much. This is Think Tech Hawaii, Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campanga, and we have a wonderful guest today, Ms. Kaui from the Office of Hawaiian Education. So we'll be back in 1 minute. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, this is Think Tech Hawaii, and it's Wednesday. Every Wednesday is Energy Wednesday here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. Come and listen to us. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to ask Sharon to tell us more.
Come and see us every Wednesday, as Jay said. And we have people like Jim Albers from HECO here and co-host Ray Starling here every Wednesday. We not only go on Olelo and OC16, but also stream live. So please come visit us, hear about the latest in clean energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here. You got any comment on all this?
As important as energy is in all of our lives today, this is a great forum and a great format to vet those issues. So I encourage everybody to listen in and participate.
Okay, Ray, what do you think for a close?
Well, I think this is the greatest show in the energy world here in Hawaii. You can come here every week, 1 hour, and catch the latest on what's happening and hear from the people who really know what's going on. Like Jim Alberts, we appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
Ray Starling, Sharon Moriwaki, Jim Alberts, and Jay Fidel here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. Wednesday. Aloha. Aloha.
Aloha, welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Again, I'm Carl Campanga, your host, and today we have with us Ms. Kaui from the Office of Hawaiian Education. Welcome once again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So last segment we talked about a lot of good information. This segment I want to jump into the challenges that have existed historically and currently with the program. So for starters, the program as it exists at the moment, it wasn't always what it was. It started much smaller. So when it began, I believe it was in the 70s when it began, were there challenges to it? And what can you tell us about some of that part and then leading up to now?
Well, I think absolutely there are challenges with just sort of the idea of making Hawaiian language, culture, and history a priority in a system where mainstream education is really designed to get students to think sort of Western in nature. And so having something like that in that kind of a system really is pushing the system to do something a little bit different in terms of designing education for students. And so, built on sort of that mentality, it's always been sort of kept at a really small sort of implementation level. And then resourcing to that is really around whether or not there's a continuous build-up in value of the things that could be delivered through a program like the Kupuna component. Recently, so I took on the directorship just a few months ago, probably about 7 months ago, and one of my first sort of wants was to go out into the field and to have conversations with Kupuna and to listen to them about, the issues that they face sort of on the ground in the classroom, and the challenges that those things present to a state office that is concerned with making sure that at a system-wide level and in a systemic way, we're able to do a better job at implementing the Kupuna component. And so some of the things that I've heard is really tied to whether or not at all levels of the system, folks are valuing what the Kupuna component is about. The current design of the program is very vague. The roles and responsibilities tied to the implementation of the Kupuna program is also very vague. And the current design of resourcing to make sure that the implementation is much more rigorous is not structured appropriately to be able to put sort of the needs in the field, to take care of the needs that are out in the field. and even the sort of contractual organizational things that we set up as a department. Oftentimes, for instance, hiring, supervision of classified staff and personnel and those kinds of things sometimes come into our pathway, and then we have to deal with it in the context of preserving the foundation of the kupuna component, the intention of why we have it in our schools, and take care of sort of the operational side as well. And so I think we've got to do a better job as a system to figure out how those two cross.
Is it a challenge trying to fit it into a very tight structure within the Department of Education? And is that one of the problems, or is it also, you were mentioning making sure the value of it is understood? Is that from the Department of Education, or is that from more parents?
I think it's less of the system at this point and more of whether or not, as a society, we value that this is something important for students to have access to, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like if this is something that is valued, then you can start to contribute the resources to it.
Yes.
And what I see shifting is sort of a lifting up of the value of Hawaiian education and the contribution it can make to building a whole child. And using that as sort of the catalyst to be able to redesign policy and practice so that the system that we have in place can sort of build that value into the operation side of it, so that there's a much smoother flow of resources and services and structure, so that we can get to the business of educating the students.
Yeah, well, one of the immediate values that I see, and I think maybe a lot of people see, is recognizing Native Hawaiian culture as not only existing, but as viable. It's a viable living culture. Mm-hmm. Again, I have a degree in history, and what has always mattered to me from a history or archaeological perspective was always, what are the aspects of this culture that pervade today, that exist today? What have we learned, and what have we gained from this culture? And is it viable? Is this still a viable living culture that we need to respect and we need to make sure is recognized as what it is? In that, and is there a challenge with that?
Absolutely. I feel like with our kupuna that are true kupuna, and when I say true kupuna, I mean that they have the wisdom that's tied to being a kupuna, and so you hear me say kupuna component, kupuna program, CPR program. It's because another one of our challenges is that because we don't have enough that have that wisdom, that carry that wisdom into the program, we have to make sure to be able to pull people so that we can service our students and make sure that the students are still receiving Hawaiian language, culture, and history education in an appropriate way. And so we've had to sort of make accommodations for the fact that we don't have kupuna in all schools. And so we've had to, and when I say kupuna, I mean sort of the kupuna that's tied to the wisdom. And so we've had to hire folks that still come with, a lot of content knowledge around the Hawaiian perspectives, but are not sort of acknowledged as kupuna. They don't necessarily have that mo'opuna kupuna relationship at home.
More of a traditional historic grounding.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that they don't bring content knowledge around Hawaiian history, culture, and language. I think it's more of the sort of the positioning of and status of what a kupuna traditionally was that might be an absence.
Do you think that the existence of the immersion schools, the existence of the definitive Hawaiian language and Hawaiian studies courses within Kamehameha, do you think those help? That's most likely where you're getting some of your kupuna from. I would guess, and even through UH, University of Hawaii, we know that there's Native Hawaiian studies. And do those support the program, or are they just along with the program?
Yeah, I think those sort of push the limits of our public education system to open up more space for a larger conversation on what Hawaiian education really is. And sometimes those folks come with a different set, as they graduate through our programs and then they go into the university and those things, they come with a different level of rigor that's really built on sort of this process of learning that they went through P20, some of them for P20. And the kupuna that are in the traditional design, the original design of the kupuna component was they already had that. You know, they already had that essence in them, that wisdom in them. They didn't have to go through school to do that, but they were able to sort of embody that through their just the regular way in living. You know, their nohona, their lifestyle.
It's the family enculturation.
Right.
You're brought up this way. You know
Right.
this way. Now you're learning how to bring it out and teach this way.
Yeah, in an educational arena that
Sure.
is different than the way you learn to do these things, right? And so it's really trying to merge the two so that they can sort of help each other and support each other.
Yeah.
That sometimes even those that come from the schooling way of knowing about Hawaiian culture, language, and history can contribute back to the kupuna, and then the kupuna can also contribute to them so that we have a much more fuller delivery of Hawaiian language, culture, and history education in our system.
Excellent. Let me take a little step back. So, congratulations. You've been director for, you said, maybe 7 months.
7 months, maybe.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful. What drives you for this program and for what you're hoping it's going to achieve? What's your driver? What motivates you?
So I originally came into education as a Hawaiian language immersion teacher, and coming out of that into the state office, sort of moving through that. But so that's just one piece of my preparation. I think the bigger piece that I like to speak to is the nohona, the lifestyle, the way that I was raised. I'm a product of the public education system. Graduate of the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm very homegrown, born and raised in Waimanalo, on the Waimanalo Hawaiian homestead. I look to my parents who have sort of carved out a path for me. They've given me the tools to be successful in anything that I decide to do, but I think more than that, they've put me on a path and they've said, now this is what you need to do for Kanaka Hawaii. And so get into that space around education, Hawaiian education, and start to push those limits of where Hawaiian education has been contained, and push the limits on those things. So I look back to my ohana as sort of my foundation, and sort of the things that I bring out of my experiences growing up in an ohana that lived on the homestead, that was sort of surrounded by people that looked like me and talked like me and helped me to feel like I belonged in that community and helped to carry those values.
It goes back to that identity.
Yeah,
That identity
absolutely.
and not losing the identity.
And not losing who you are in anything that you do. Like, that is your place of strength.
Yeah.
Use that as a way to help
Which
more people.
I think the state of Hawaii needs more of that. Needs to be more grounded in Native Hawaiian values. In some ways, we get away from it. Other ways, I think people try to get back to it. But I think that's why I think it's so important, is we need to remember where we are. And we need to remember who was here before that helped us be where we are now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I really, it's a natural, I feel like it's a natural tendency for me because that's just how I was raised. But it doesn't mean that it can't be something that is not accessible to folks who are not Hawaiian. I feel like it's even more than a Hawaiian thing, it's a human decency thing.
It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And that when people talk about bringing aloha out to the world, that's what they mean. Like, you know what, there is a core essence of goodness and of value, and that if you can bring that goodness to people from a Native Hawaiian platform, everyone just goes, oh, good, I feel good, I feel warm, I feel the sun now.
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay. We have to take another quick little break.
Okay.
So again, thank you for joining us. This is Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campanga, and we have Ms. Kaui with us today. So be right back. Thank you.
Aloha, this is Kaylee Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute, and I want to thank you for watching Think Tech Hawaii. We are delighted to be partners with Think Tech because it gives us the opportunity to bring to you a show every week on Monday at 2:00 p.m. called Ehana Kako. Ehana Kako means let's work together because we believe that Hawaii will be a better place when everybody works together. And in what way? Well, at the Grassroot Institute, we research 3 basic areas and we invite guests to come on board from across the country, the state, and the nation to talk about a better economy, a better government, a better society. Now, aren't those things we all want? Indeed. If you'd like to have the latest research in terms of public policy, as well as ways in which we can build a better government, economy, and society, then tune in every Monday on Think Tech Hawaii at 2:00 p.m. for our fascinating guests on Ehana Kako. Let's work together. I'm Kaylee Akina with the Grassroot Institute, and I'll see you then. Aloha.
Aloha, welcome back to Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We're going to continue our conversation with Ms. Kaui Sang, the Office of Hawaiian Education. So now, we talked a bit about the program design and direction that it could go. So what are your thoughts, 7 months in as director, what are your thoughts as far as where you are, where you might like to go, and where you would like to bring the program?
If I could back up a couple of years, I think I want to sort of point to this idea of valuing Hawaiian education. And in 2014, the Board of Education really worked hard to redesign the policy that allows Hawaiian education to exist in the department. And in doing that, what they did was they created a different space for Hawaiian education to sort of live in the system. Which is the office that I currently work in, the Office of Hawaiian Education. They also created sort of a person, the role that I'm in, the director, a position for that person to start to infiltrate into the system and get out there and integrate Hawaiian education across the system in all content areas for all students, K-12. And with that, it's sort of been a different space for us to exist in, and we're in different conversations than we were 2 years ago around how to grow the program and grow Hawaiian education across the system. So thinking forward, some of the things that are embedded in the policy are really sort of pushing us to design differently, design the educational space differently around Hawaiian education. And one of those things is a requirement that we investigate the learning targets that we're shooting for in a set of standards, if you will, K-12, so that all of our professional staff understand the goals of Hawaiian education and they can access it. We can provide the professional development opportunities that they need to access that so that they can start to build that into the learning experiences for all students.
That makes sense. That makes sense. How tied currently, as a result of Common Core, how tied to the standards and requirements of what the Common Core system requires from the public education perspective, how tied is the Hawaiian education program to what those standards are right now?
I think at this point, what we're looking at is sort of designing educational experiences that are still meant and intended to meet the Hawaii state standards, which include Common Core. I believe the Board of Education just recently passed Next Generation Science Standards yesterday. And so being able to make sure that we're aligning to the state standards. And so when we talk about Hawaiian education, it's not necessarily a separate set of standards, but more about how do we integrate these learning targets into the state standards and into the learning experiences so that we have a different process and a different context for providing and delivering the content of our standards, of our state standards to the students.
All right, so you're trying to bring together the concept or the structure of Common Core concept, and you're just trying to apply, make sure that the appropriate content is provided to fit within that structure.
for example, if we want to talk about perhaps some language arts standards around reading and writing and those kinds of things, well, one art project that I know that our folks out in the curriculum side of the department was super interesting and super exciting, and I thought, wow, this is so innovative. What they did was they took art and they took literacy and they took this Hawaiian perspective and they merged all of it together. And so there was this, and I don't know if I should point her name, I don't want to say her name, I don't want to, but she's our language arts specialist. And she reached out to me and she talked about, you know, here are some really well-known paintings of our ali'i. And so having students access that through literacy and to be able to explain sort of who this person was.
Yeah,
So it's presenting this history education that's grounded in Hawaii, but is still speaking to the language arts skill sets that we would like to see in our students. And so merging all of that together is really, really, I mean, I think one of the innovations of
it's
this.
language, it's art, it's music through song, it's really bringing, which is really more of a comprehensive approach.
Yes.
Really. So, you know, as you know, trying to make a whole child, as you say, you need a comprehensive approach, not just a singular approach.
Yes.
You must learn this and this and this and this and think you move on. So that's where I worry about some of the Common Core standards that we have and some of the ways that it seems as though teachers are being required to teach to the tests as opposed to teach to the solution, problem-solving child comprehensively. So that's why I was curious about how Hawaiian education will fit into that, because everything that I have learned is that it's about the whole person, which isn't just me, it's everyone in my family who came before me.
Absolutely.
And that I represent everyone, and therefore I need to make sure that I am presenting myself appropriately through that. And how do you have that happen if you're tied to a few strict, rigid rules? So that's why. So is that one of the challenges that you're seeing?
Well, I think that's one of our bright spots.
Okay.
I think that's one of our bright spots in the sense that the Board of Education also, in a year or same time I was put into the position, also adopted a new policy, a new kind of policy. It's called E3 Naho Pena'o policy. And Naho Pena'o is an outcomes framework, so it speaks to sort of the holistic approach to educating students. And the design of Naho Pena'o went through a very community-driven, on-the-ground sort of conversation with folks who have been involved in Hawaiian education for a long time. Our task was to be able to ground a set of outcomes to Hawaii. And so in the development of Naho Pena'o, we started by designing it in Hawaiian. And then we sort of went through this process of trying to put it into English, and we just completely failed at it. And so instead of translating it into English, we decided, you know what, let's just provide a narrative for folks to be able to identify with what we're seeing. And it's called Naho Pena'o. Our acronym for it is HA.
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 Okay.
And it's made up of 6 statements that actually spell out the word breath. And all of that was totally unintentional. Right, ha equals breath. Absolutely unintentional, but it speaks to this idea of strengthening your sense of belonging, your sense of responsibility, which is what you talked about.
And connection as well. Yeah.
Because you bring all of these kupuna with you.
Yes.
And when you do these things, you do it with a sense of excellence.
Yes.
And aloha for everything and everyone.
Yes.
And make sure that you have a sense of total well-being, and then build your connection to Hawaii, this place.
Yeah.
And so,
see, I personally appreciate that perspective and feel that if we could take that, I mean, that in itself is it's its own philosophy that we can take on and take into ourselves and then take with us. And if we can get that concept, there's no way, you don't want to standardize that concept. You want to embody that concept.
Absolutely. Those are the same keywords that we talk about when we talk about Nawa Bena'o. It's not just about the skills, but it's also about the dispositions and the behaviors that we want to be able to exhibit and so being able to connect to them, those outcomes, and then be able to direct others to them really allows us to create bigger space for Ha to exist.
Which, yes, again, I think is an important place to begin and then end. So I truly appreciate that. And as I mentioned, I enjoy learning through my children, and as they learn, as they bring all the ideas. As my son comes home singing a song in Hawaiian, I'm like, I think I know some of those words. What's the song about? He's like, oh, and he tells me. I'm like, oh, great, okay, good. Just learn some history too. I love that. So, and that's, but that goes back, the way we teach. The way historically, going back thousands of years, the way we teach, the process of enculturation is, this is who we are, this is where we came from, and this is how we do what we do, and then why we do what we do. And we run into problems when we start to codify that, when we start to say, you know what, everybody needs to live this way. Why? Because I say so. Instead of, you know what, this is how we live, and here's the outcome, and here's the result if we live this way.
And you allow that door to stay open.
Yeah.
And you allow space for others to say, well, this is how I live, and this is what the outcomes of my lifestyle is, and then build the connections between this, and know that there's going to be points that intersect and points that don't intersect, and be okay with that.
And be okay with that.
Because there's enough space for everybody.
Yeah, no, see, I have great respect and great appreciation for that.
And so when you talk about sort of the kupuna component and that wisdom that they bring, I think those are the things that we look for when they go into our schools.
Okay.
And that they're able to deliver that in an effective way.
So you're looking to grow the program. You're looking at the moment, I think it's through 6th grade?
It's currently in the 6th grade. Our charge is to provide Hawaiian education K-12.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is looking to sort of pull back on stuff and go, well, are we effective in the way we've currently designed the implementation of any of the Hawaiian Studies curriculum? And if not, then what are the areas that we need to improve on, and how do we do that? And then on the other side of that is what really works, and how do we start to scale that out even more?
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, we only have about a minute left, and so I need to do a quick wrap up, but in order to achieve the goal, what's some support that you can use? Is it legislative support? Is it community support? Is it all of the above? Is in order to help achieve that goal, in order to get it K through 12, in order to make sure that it's more of a comprehensive, holistic program, where are the supports that are needed?
I definitely feel like we're going to be needing sort of the policy support in legislation, continued sort of education around the value of Hawaiian education collectively. But in terms of the community, I think really we need community to be able to come to this with an open mind. It's a difficult place to be in, and if you're not sort of comfortable with it. But one of the things that I like to always point to is the ololo no ea na vai ho'i ka oleo ki aka mai, he ala I ma'i ka hele I e o mau makua. And really it says we shouldn't be afraid of the things that we don't know. I mean, it's something that's already been carved out for us. Our parents have already carved that path. Our kupuna have already carved that path for us. So when you come to it, there's not really any fear that you need to live in, but the boldness to say, I'm going to go where I'm not really comfortable, to be able to investigate how to strengthen my sense of identity.
And that comes back to having a strength of identity, having a strength of esteem, of self-esteem. So, and it's all tied in, because your self-esteem can also come from your history, from your past, from your kupuna.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I could talk for another 3 hours with you on this, and maybe someday we'll have a chance to. But thank you so much again. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I hope we got some more information about the program out. I know that I would personally love to support the program in every way that I can. What I will say to everyone is thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the opportunity to let us into your world today. And once again, this is Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campanga, and thank you again, Ms. Kaui-san.
Aloha.
Mahalo.